Pirate kings, pirate queens, non-binary monarchs of the sea. What's going on? Changed up the background a little bit here. No blue screen up today. And we're changing up the content as well. Instead of doing a chapter reaction like I used to do, I want to start going into some analysis videos. So today we're going to talk about One Piece Chapter 1087, Battleship Bags. The first thing that came to my mind after reading this chapter was this idea of earned strength. You know, at the very beginning, we have G1, it's these two battleships with giant indentations, and Brand New is telling Full Body and Django about them. And Brand New says, these men were not born as heroes, referring to Garp and Kuzan. And I just think it's a really cool choice that Oda made by having Django and Full Body be the ones asking about this. Because just like we're seeing Garp and Kuzan in a much earlier stage of growth, as we get further into this flashback later in the chapter, Full Body and Django are, and correct me if I'm wrong, two of the only Marines that we have seen come pretty much from the bottom up, the way that we have Kobe and Helmeppo. They're the closest thing we have to that. So it's a nice little connector of this idea of growth, of coming up from the bottom, and maybe in Garp's case, eventually being seen as a hero, a monster, just being that pinnacle of the top. That journey is what's most important here. And while I don't think that we're really seeing the characters on Hachinosu going through that journey in the present moment, I think that's going to tell us a lot about what could be very relevant for Kobe, maybe Helmeppo and Hibari and the other sword members, but I think for Kobe in particular. Also, when I was writing notes for this, I just saw one of the clouds that Oda drew, and I just love the way that he outlines them, and just he has this little disconnect on one of the corners. It's just neat. I love his line work. I love it. He's wonderful. As we come back to Hachinosu and we see this battle between the Blackbeard pirates and the Marines start to play out a little bit more, starting with Sanwan Wolf jobbing to Garp, just going right underwater. Vasco's shot unleashes a fire attack, and Garp immediately, almost instinctively, raises two pirates up as meat shields. And the thing that sticks out to me here is the look on Garp's face as he's holding these two pirates up that are, I think at this point, just pretty much burning up right in front of him. He looks almost taken aback, a little forlorn, maybe a little sullen. And I'm just curious as to where this comes from. To me, it seems like this was a very instinctive move on Garp's part. There was no thought. It's just, okay, attack coming at me, raise these two, I've got them at my disposal. It's honestly a very Monkey D thing to do. It's the kind of thing that, the kind of thought process or the kind of intuition and use of surroundings that Luffy would do as well. But there is something undeniably brutal about it, and it feels to me like Garp, I feel like that's what Garp is taken aback from, that brutality in the way he chose to defend. Obviously, it's not something that's, bogging him down, because a few panels later we see him with that usual... A few panels later, we see him with that usual just almost unhinged D grin as he's fighting against this mass of pirates coming on. But given, the fact that Garp is a Marine and his character arc so far about being someone who enforces justice, but is always, I guess, towing that line or navigating that line between justice and morals, and what is intrinsically good and what the system that can deliver justice defines as good. That's his entire character arc in Marineford. And when I see Garp looking at these two pirates, it feels to me like it's very easy for him to write it off as, they're pirates, they made this choice there in this fight. That's just how it is. Especially given how long he has been a Marine, how long he has been doing basically this as his career. But at the same time, he is the one who stepped foot onto Hachinosu, who invaded it. Now, he didn't start this whole war, Blackbeard is the one who kidnapped Kobe. Let's be very clear about that. But given everything that Garp went through with Ace, with grappling with his decision to let that execution go through, and his attempt to, I guess, sort of atone for that by rescuing Kobe, and also just because Kobe is his protege. Um, is basically what Garp would have wanted Ace and Luffy to be, but that's a whole tangent. I don't think we need to go on any more of those right now. It seems to me like Garp is definitely in a place of reflection about the Marines, his role in it, and what he is going to do going forward. And I know there's a lot of talk saying Garp's gonna die. This is it. Garp's out. This is the death toll. Maybe. Maybe. I don't think it's right now. Again, I'll get a little more into that in just a second. But I think that what comes next and Garp's role in enacting justice is something that's very much on his mind right now. And coming back to that line of thinking of us versus them, of you chose to be a pirate, that's just how this works, that's the kind of thinking that led to Marineford. That is the kind of thinking that led to Garp essentially letting Ace get executed. And so, of course, that's going to weigh very, very heavily on his mind and probably be something that he keeps on revisiting as he goes through this whole ordeal. In fact, the setup here feels pretty similar to Marineford, or maybe an anti-Marineford, because we've got, a Marine and a bunch of Marines trying to save a Marine captured by pirates instead of pirate Marine. You know what I'm talking about. And I feel like this is something that has been brought up in the community and has led a lot of people to say, oh, Garp's gonna die, Whitebeard died, Garp died, yeah, the parallel. Again, I'm not discounting it entirely. And I'm not saying that parallels are bad for theorying or trying to map out the future of an ongoing story like this. But I don't think it's that one to one. If we are talking about, parallels between Marineford and this, it's not even an arc, this segment, this Hachinosu segment of One Piece. The biggest thing that feels off to me when you're making that comparison is this Hachinosu segment's lack of a full-on Sakazuki type figure. That main antagonist, and that would-be teaches off with Law, and right now Kuzan is sort of taking that role of the main antagonist, the main obstacle to Garp's team's outcome. And I do see there being another similarity between those two because neither of them at the time are the head honcho. Sakazuki was an admiral. He answered to Sengoku and Kong. Kuzan is a Titanic captain. He technically answers to Blackbeard, although the way things work there are murky in a bunch of different ways. But Kuzan doesn't feel like he has that same sort of agenda that Sakazuki did. I know that there's a lot about Kuzan's agenda that is incredibly murky by great design. It doesn't feel like Kuzan is trying to impart his own philosophy, his own ideals on this world around him. His mission just seems much more cut and dry. Stop them from taking Kobe away. Make sure Pirate Island runs the way it is. It feels much more reactive as opposed to active the way Sakazuki did. Maybe it's an inversion. I don't know. This is the territory that we get into when we talk about parallels between arcs. Anything could be argued. At the very least, unlike Marineford, it doesn't feel like we're seeing a new tier of power or we're pulling the curtain back on something we've only heard allusions to like we did at the end of this first half of the story of Marineford. And for that reason, I don't really think it's going to be that one-to-one mapping of what happened at Marineford. And coming back to Kuzan, I still don't know what to think. Every single panel he appears on, you can interpret it in two completely different ways. You can say, okay, this is what we're being given. This is it being straight. Kuzan is a defector. He is working with Blackbeard. Their paths may diverge on some point, but at the very least, they are cooperative and there's no deceit there. Or Kuzan's a spy. Kuzan's working with someone in the Marines, possibly and likely Garp, especially given their relationship getting more defined here. It can be either one. The way Oda is drawing these panels, the way he's structuring these sentences, he's just feeding the theory machine, and he knows exactly what he is doing, and I love him for this. And the thing about the situation that Kuzan is in specifically as part of Blackbeard's crew is that unlike a lot of the different factions in the story, the Blackbeard pirates individually are in this for themselves. We even see it with Avlo Pizarro's speech at the end, which I do want to get to. So, the idea of a member of the Blackbeard Pirates having their own agenda and not necessarily being 100% on the same page as their captain or their crewmates makes sense. If anything, it makes him fit in better with this group that he may or may not truly be in cahoots with. He's given us this little Schrodinger's pheasant. Nice. As this chapter develops more and more, the aim of the rescue party at the moment shifts from getting Kobe and surrounding the pirates to leaving the island. They're not trying to destroy it. They're not trying to make any more trouble than they have to. They just want to get their guy and get out. And then Kobe, in a very lovely, very heartwarming, but very gullible display, falls for a pirate disguised as a civilian, asking for help, who brandishes a knife, and then, of course, Garp gets stabbed through by Shiryu. Couple things to unpack here. First off, Kobe talking about how he feels like a burden. This actually isn't the first time he has expressed these feelings. When he talks about everyone coming to save him in the chapter when I think he still has the ball and chain on, he has this feeling again that people might get hurt because of him. And now it has actually happened with Garp getting run through. This really makes me think back to what Brand New said about these heroes not being born heroes. Kobe, even better than Django and Full Body, Kobe is the best example. Kobe is the epitome of that. More than anyone else, more than Django and Full Body, more than anyone, he started as the weakest, most cowardly, just bottom of the totem pole. You couldn't get any lower than that. And now he's a hero. A hero. He's not the hero yet. And this incident's gonna weigh very, very deeply on his future. Regardless of whether Garp dies, whether, I don't know, Helmeppo, who knows, anyone, and whether anyone dies, Kobe is going to have a burden on his shoulders after this, and it may be undue, just as Garp said his own guilt in this specific instance, this chapter, wasn't necessarily correctly placed. Because this is already, either way, again, regardless of casualty, a huge incident. People have been injured. Even Hibari, she's getting better, but she, still got frozen by Kuzan, and she feels like she's a burden, and they're just really cute. They just need a kiss already. Please, Oda, please, please. They're really cute. Anyway, to me, this is going to be a newfound motivation for Kobe, or at least another level to his motivation to become stronger, and I guess a more direct and clear purpose for him. I could see this as a really neat inversion of where Luffy was after Saburi, or, to a lesser degree at the beginning of Water 7 the first time he ran to Kuzan. And while in those instances Luffy wanted to be strong enough to protect his crewmates himself, I think that's something that's going to be, of course, desirable for Kobe, but I don't think that's going to be his main objective. To me, it feels like Kobe is going to want to be strong enough where no one has to protect him, because that's the position he's been in this whole time. Again, him, being that person who was not born a hero, who was essentially just, a slave on Elvida's ship, who Luffy had to save, who Garp had to, or I guess Bogart, in the cover story. I'm fuzzy on that. I should really reread it. But again, he's had to be bailed out in so many situations, and he can't be that hero. He can't be the future of the Marines if people have to worry about him. At the very least, in his mind, he won't be able to. Now, coming back to Garp's side of this scene and his altercation with Shiryu, this is sort of where we get into, again, those the murky territory of making a bunch of parallels, and I'm gonna try and dispute one parallel with another parallel. Just it's where we're at. It's where we're at. Nothing's skew here. Basically, in the similarities of this segment to Marineford, people are one saying that Garp is so powerful that they had to nerf him, which I completely agree with. Like, no question there. No question there. But I think there might be in certain sections of the fandom an association between Shiryu stabbing Garp through with his sword and Sakazuki punching through Ace. Um, and all these people saying, "Oh, Garp's down, he's weakened." Like literally in the chapter, they say that. I think there's a prevalence of an idea that okay, this is it for him. And I don't think this is that moment. This doesn't feel to me like Sakazuki running through Ace. This feels to me like Squard stabbing Whitebeard. Not related to weapons or anything, just as far as the narrative beats and where this fits into the story. The fact that there was some sort of ruse involved in it, and just the general trajectory of this arc we're on. It doesn't feel like we're in that decline yet. And again, this is not me saying Garp is going to get out of this alive. I have no idea, and I'm not going to put myself onto either camp for that because I legitimately don't know. I just don't think this is the time for him to go out. Garp hasn't had a chance to really show himself off yet. Yes, Galaxy Impact was crazy, an amazing moment, but I think we're gonna get a bit more from him, especially as now we're finally getting to delve into what a powerful figure that he is in this world, and some more of his backstory and previous motivations. At least that's the hope. And again, I'm not trying to force parallels where they shouldn't be fit. I'm not trying to say, oh, Luffy has to have a Garp the way that Roger did, and it's either Toby or Smoker. Mainly, I just want to try and use different narrative cues and structural precedents that Oda has established, and try and use those to, I guess, clear some air in where we're at with current developments in the story. Then, just after this exchange, Kuzan ends up running in, saying to his pirates, "You don't know you know who you're messing with. Even if you tie down his arms and legs, you still can't beat him." And this is again one of those instances where you can read Kuzan's words and actions in two completely different ways, and there's a chance that they're both valid. Again, this can be Kuzan calling out to his, I don't want to say comrades, but the people on his side and giving them an actual warning, or this could be Kuzan, still telling the truth because I can't handle Garp. It's Garp. It's Garp the Fist. But there could be another ulterior motive here, potentially trying to get into a one-on-one with Garp himself so he has more control over the way this plays out. I know that when this whole confrontation between Garp and the Blackbeard Pirates first became apparent, there was talk of, oh, maybe Blackbeard is going to make Kuzan prove himself, prove his loyalty in a death match with Garp. I feel like certain developments and exposition about the way Blackbeard's crew works doesn't make that obligatory, but it's still plausible. But this makes me think that maybe Kuzan is one step ahead. Maybe he's not waiting around for Teach to tell him to kill Garp. It's going to look a lot better if he kills Garp himself. This may be tinfoil territory, but I feel like there is a chance that Kuzan's aim, likely planned with Garp, is to fake Garp's death. For what purpose, I do not know. It could be some sort of covert mission. It could be for infiltration. Or he could just be after a more active role in Blackbeard's plans to make sure that they don't get too out of hand. Or potentially even to subvert, or not, that's not the word, or to steer them in a direction that would benefit, at the very least, the Marines, hopefully the world at large, because again, Kuzan's justice is different than the Marines' justice, just like Garp's justice is different than the Marines' justice, and their two justices may not be as different, or they still might be. Again, this could just be completely my student went astray. This could just be Garp has the high ground. Who knows? Could. But either way, I'm just loving the interactions between these two characters. This flashback was great. It was such a great way to explore the growth of a relationship over such a short amount of time, with the way that the sound effect bubbles, don't you dare, with the onomatopoeia bubbles getting bigger and bigger each time Kuzan punched, with Garp going through all these details, was like, oh, my son's a revolutionary, my grandson's a pirate, what's going, and to them becoming friends, and Garp being the one chasing Kuzan instead of Kuzan having to chase Garp at the beginning of that flashback, and Garp just having this very solitary nature, or at least not wanting to be responsible for someone, still looking for that freedom, like we've seen with his refusal to become an admiral. That's a side I also want to see more exploration of that, and I'm sure that's something we'll get in the Rocks flashback. But the fact that I can't really place when this happens in relation to Rocks to God Valley, and if that's just me not looking at the wiki hard enough, please let me know. That makes this even more interesting to me. Whether this characteristic was something that he had from the start of his time in the Marines, which it very well may be with his reference to having his freedom, or if there could be something related to his dealings with Rocks and God Valley that at least contributed to this side of his personality at the time. But again, this was just such a lovely, lovely way to explore this relationship, and I really, really want more of it, Oda. Please. And as we get to the ending of this chapter, we see Avlo Bizarro taking full control of Hachinosu, or at least expanding it so it has full limbs, and going in to try and sink this ship with all the civilians. Very high stakes. And I just love this speech he gives, because it really ties everything that's been going on in this chapter together. Talking about how, oh, everything in the paper is Blackbeard this, it's Blackbeard that. Well, what about us? It's time for us to take some of the spotlight. Again, that's exactly how this crew works. They're not in it as a team. They're just around each other because it's convenient for each of their singular goals. And that really puts where we're at in the story into context. We are in the final saga. It's been a year since Wano ended. Oda's taken this month-long break, and we made it through. We made it. And we're back. Anyway, but that's what this is going to be characterized. This whole rat race. It's what we've had all these allusions to since Wano, of all the chaos in the world. This rampant every person for themselves nature that's very well characterized in the Blackbeard Pirates themselves, whether it is, going after this giant treasure, or trying to climb through the ranks in a pirate crew. The Blackbeard Pirates are kind of giving Toby Ropepool vibes. I can't lie. Or cashing in on a cross guild bounty, like we just saw in this chapter, with Garp having that 3 crown, essentially 3 billion berry bounty. Lovely. He's on the same tiers as Grandson. They're both equal threats, interesting, but again, bounties aren't power level. That's not today. Not today. We're not doing that today. Didn't think we'd be seeing that this chapter. But to me, Oda's doing a really good job of not just having his characters collide and play off each other in ways that he hasn't been able to before, but I think he's finally doing that with his themes too, which is really one of his strengths, and something that's just so nice that we're just starting to get the payoff for that. And I just want to bring up the very end of what he says, that headline that Avlo Pizarro creates for himself. Different translations are going to word it a little differently, but essentially coming down to the Marines who went to save Captain Kobe were completely annihilated, eradicated, decimated, shot down, sunken, whatever word to signify catastrophe that we keep seeing in the final saga. It's the exact same kind of wording that was given when Law's crew lost, when their submarine started sinking, when the Victoria Punk got not even split in half, just blown up by the giants. All these markers of tragedy for these factions that we follow and, side with to whatever degree or another. Maybe not Kid, but he's been at least in some kind of protagonistic light for parts of the story. And the thing that initially jumped out at me, even when we first saw this with the Victoria Punk, was how similar this was to when Luffy lost his crew at Sabaody. The Straw Hat Pirates were utterly eradicated, I think is what it was. Again, translations will differ. But that tells me that these are these very, very dark moments. And for what Avlo's saying right now, this is just hypothetical. But it tells me that there is going to be this, I don't know about rebirth, but this coming back stronger than they were before. And that sort of gives me more credence to things maybe not working out the way that everyone had hoped, but at least a better future than it could be, and how I feel like a lot of people are prescribing it will be at the moment. And then the last line of the chapter, when Kobe is worried about everyone on the civilian ship, Garp says, "Don't panic. Justice will prevail." And again, this could just be exactly what's on the tin. Garp saying, "No, we're going to win. We're doing the right thing. It's going to work out." Or it could be masking something else. It could be him having some sort of in with Kuzan and knowing that this is part of a grander plan. It could be, we've got an ace up our sleeve, people have been throwing Bogart around, people have been throwing Smoker around, like maybe Gin. Could Gin finally show back up? No, that's not it. That's not a heat. We're saving it for Laugh Tale. Or it could be more of Garp reflecting on his morality and everything he's been through and done. And the fact that he finally made the choice to enact his justice, what he knows in his heart is the right thing to do. Going to save Kobe. Doesn't matter if it's part of their orders, doesn't matter if Blackbeard is an emperor. He knows that's what's right. Not just for him, he knows that Kobe is the future of the Marines, and he knows that saving him is of the utmost importance, regardless of what the Gorosei, Sengoku, regardless of their thoughts on the matter. Which is, again, very counter to how he was acting pre-time skip. And even if he doesn't make it out of this, there will be ramifications for the good, as I described earlier, and probably more that I haven't even thought of yet. And to me, that sounds like justice prevailing. I could be overthinking it. Who knows? I have a tendency to. But it's just nice that we get to give Garp such a nice arc here. I'm really loving it, and I really want more. I want more. I'm always gonna want more. Thanks, Oda. And then speaking of wanting more, I didn't expect that we would be still in the outside world. I had a feeling we'd be going back to Egghead at this point. It seemed like as good a time as any. We still could, we still might not. But I'm still fine with this. This is still wonderful, getting to explore all the different parts of this world and seeing all these threads between them and how they're relating to each other in real time instead of in these big bursts like we used to. But it makes me think about what this whole final saga is going to look like. And part of me would love it, as unlikely as it is, as probably unfeasible as it is, if when this Egghead incident happens, that we have all these pieces we've been setting up, the Straw Hats, Vegapunk, the Satellites, the Seraphim, Bonnie, potentially Kuma, the X, Y, and Z Marines, Borsellino, St. J. Garcia, Saturn, and now these revelations with York coming to a head. And that's probably enough. But there's still just a part of me that would love it if we could have all these other factions that we've been exploring converge at Egghead, resulting in this instance that's going to shake up the entire world, reverberate, and then shuffle all these different pieces and parties around, and then have all these different skirmishes that then start off the battle royale that Oda has described the final saga as. But of course, I don't think that's going to happen for a couple reasons. One, we've got enough going on at Egghead. There's still, like, there's gonna be so much happening once those Marines touch down and once we get back to everyone there. But also just the amount of time it would take for Oda to not just connect the dots between all the pieces we've been teased with as definitely being part of Egghead, but then reintegrating all these other tangential parties. If this is gonna last a few more years, if Oda's timetable for the final saga is anything to be trusted, it's Oda. It's gonna be longer than he says, but I think we're getting to the place where we can trust him a little more now. We can't have Egghead be that long and have Elbaf and have Laugh Tale and then Marija. However, that's all gonna play out. It's not feasible. But what could be really neat is if all these different conflicts happening. Law versus Blackbeard, Kid versus Shanks, Garp versus the Black Empires of Hachinosu, the Cross Guild mobilizing to find the One Piece, Sabo learning about Im. If there were a way for all those different actions to then have consequences that ultimately keep Butterfly affecting out and contributing to whatever the Egghead incident is, that would be everything I want for the culmination of this arc as far as that spiritual convergence of all these different threads we've got going on. I'm so glad we're back. I am so ready for this next chapter. Let me know if you like this, if you're down for me blathering all my thoughts on the new chapters. It is something I'd like to get into whenever I have the time for it. I just happened to find some this week. But yeah, if you liked it, please give a thumbs up there. If you want to see more of my content, whether it's for the One Piece manga or the TCG, click that subscribe button down there. It really helps. And if you have thoughts on any of my takes, agree, disagree, contribute, flame me, put them right down below. Either way, I'm Cody. Thank you again. See you next time.